This summer, the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast is being proudly sponsored by Kia UK. Kia are leading the way in electrification with their groundbreaking range of EVs and have taken strides in the future of mobility with their award-winning lineup that includes the EV9 and the EV6. Kia also have a commitment to movement that inspires and want to help cricket fans get closer to the action. Listen every week for Kia's Movement That Inspires moment for chances to win exciting experiences at the Kia Oval this summer.
God, you're good.
Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. England are in the T20 World Cup semi-finals. Australia are not. Woo! We've got a couple of mouth-watering semi-finals coming up this week. England against India on Thursday, and we're guaranteed a first-time finalist with Afghanistan taking on South Africa in the other semi-final. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today, Phil Walker, the returning Phil Walker. We'll hear all about your special project
back from my crusades
later. And for the first time ever on the show, Kate Mason, the face of TNT Sports cricket coverage, an increasingly dominant player in the cricket broadcasting space. Kate, great to have you with us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm going to bring that dominance to the Wisden
good
pod.
Glad to hear it.
Which was part of the brief that Phil provided for me. Ran to 16 and a half sides of A4.
That's it.
Front and back. I'm not really sure what he's worried about, but
I'm known for my diligence on this show
and brevity.
Yes.
I'm going to start with a confession, and I know this is pathetic, but watching Australia-India yesterday, I really wanted Australia to lose, and I'm not happy that was my abiding thought and feeling throughout the game. But I guess a childhood.
Why are you not happy with that?
yeah, surely that's a completely reasonable.
I don't think I want to lead with negativity. That is a dominantly negative emotion, and obviously that's after a childhood of watching them win everything. But it did also make me wonder: in the Ashes, do I actually want England to win, or do I just want Australia to lose?
It's actually quite a profound question. I think you're cutting to the heart of sports fandom with your very first statement on today's pod, because that's a huge thing, isn't it? Watching the bad guys go out.
No, exactly. I mean,
And increasingly in football, people I think are motivated by spite,
which we don't like. We don't like that.
We don't like it, but it's entirely understandable and a natural human emotion.
I think in cricket, because there's not that much of it, I don't mind it.
Yeah.
Whereas in football,
Yeah.
because that is everywhere,
Yeah.
it's a little bit uglier. What's your relationship with Australia like, Kate?
Well, yeah, you saw I was sending a few vibes into the into the WhatsApp group. Yeah, it's a strange one because obviously playing India in the semi-finals not ideal from an England perspective, especially given what I spent the start of the year doing, just watching us getting increasingly hammered by some of these incredible people. But it was enjoyable to watch, Yadav do what he's done to us to Australia. I really, really did enjoy that. Yeah,
you think he's right up there, don't you, Kuldeep?
I think Kuldeep is as close as anyone's got to Warne since Warne, and I know that he has to do this for so much longer to justify even being compared to Warne. But in terms of Kuldeep's peak, I don't think a wrist spinner has got this close to Warne. Obviously, there are other guys who've done really well in T20 cricket in particular, but the fact that he does it across formats and he does it by bowling quite an old school form of wrist spin, and we'll talk about Adil Rashid later in the show, but I don't think anyone's got as close to Warne as Kuldeep has.
It will be great to see him on Australian pitches in whites.
Yeah.
Where as a wrist spinner, if you've got that kind of zip and energy, then it can do unusual things. But of course, that's also the most unforgiving place to bowl. So that will be the true test of him as you talk about the kind of the full picture. Already as a white ball bowler, he's extraordinary. I mean, that wrong-un against Maxwell yesterday, when Maxwell even looked at the pitch and then looked at Kuldeep.
Like, what is this?
As if to say, what is this sorcery? And I guess that's what it was, really. Because there's no discernible change in the hand. It looks like a conventional left-hand leg break. But of course, he's just managed to twist the back of the hand enough to get it going the other way, and it kind of cushions into middle stump. It was just beautiful.
Yeah, we could be more. I could say I enjoyed watching. It was nice to watch India doing great things and to feel positive about that as compared with at the start of the year. Rohit Sharma, so enjoyable to watch him with that. Was it 19 ball 50?
Yeah,
just looking. He's so side point. he's so enjoyable to watch generally when he's like getting pissed off with the rest of his team, his like little face that he does when he thinks someone's done something stupid. And then also, of course, I'm sure you've already talked about it, but Rishabh Pant, spanking Adam Zampa for 6 off his first ball. It's just, that was lovely. Good to see India playing well. If we're gonna,
I like that, the way you turn that around, and that's a good shout.
Yeah. Do you have any?
That first 10 overs, sorry, Kate. That first 10 overs was just objectively extraordinary cricket, because in a game where you've got 22 superstars basically all jostling, and to be that dominant. Against Hazelwood actually bowled very well, so his figures were fine. But for Mitchell Starc,
sorry, his figures were ridiculous. 1 over for 14, for 4 in a 200, plays 180 game.
Exactly, yeah, and I think 3 for 10 in his first 3 overs. But Mitchell Starc, who cost $2 billion or whatever it was when he went to Calcutta, and won the IPL off the back of his own brilliance, and Rohit just made him look like a club bowler. Yeah. It was like a beer match.
Well, question,
and then the smile came over his face, that kind of bashful smile where he's slightly imprisoned by his own genius, and the sweep, the slog sweep. No, it's not right to call it a slog. The sweep, the conventional sweep off a geezer 6'4", left arm against the angle, bowling 90 mph and all the rest of it. That was just a joke shot.
We had a question on Rohit. Andy asked, off the back of Rohit's masterclass, who are the most aesthetically pleasing batsmen in the last decade to just sit back and marvel at whilst they're in full flow? He's got to be one.
Well, he is the one.
Yeah.
As you know, that's my position on it.
We were talking...
and has been for a number of years.
It's funny, Kate, you mentioned...
love runs deep.
Kate, you mentioned his demeanour on the field. I find it fascinating that he is so relaxed all the time, other than very specific moments when his teammate has done something wrong. Because when Pant didn't really do anything wrong, he basically tripped up trying to chase the ball, and Rohit completely lost his shit to Pant, and that was quite interesting because I don't think Pant did anything wrong.
I interviewed him once, very very briefly. I interviewed him on the pitch out here at the Oval in 2016, or when was that Champions Trophy? 2017.
Yeah.
And it was one of those where you grab who you can. And there was a sort of like a force field of aloofness around pretty much all of the players except for him. And he was lovely and approachable and smiley, and he's got a bit of a glint in the eye. And this was when he was just a player,
Isn't that what you say about someone who's pregnant?
I guess so. He's definitely glint in the eye.
Rohit gives off that vibe.
He was glowing, yeah.
I've always thought Rohit gives off the vibe of someone who sleeps very well.
Right, lovely,
lovely.
He's very,
he
very
looks
content.
well rested.
Yeah.
I enjoyed when he was butting with the Shazwi Jaiswal. He always looked like a kind of an annoyed uncle.
Yeah.
Even though Jaiswal was doing amazing things.
Yeah.
Almost every time, he'd make the odd mistake, he'd get out, and Sharma would just be like, who is this teenager I have to work with?
Going back to the point about aesthetics, it's the economy of movement that makes the really great players stand out to the eye. It's a cliche, but Damien Martin's movements were so minimal. That's what made him so watchable. Mark Walls, another. Rohit reminds me a little bit of Jack Callis, right? Rohit has more flourish than Jack Callis, and Rohit has more soul. There was often there was a bloodlessness about Callis, the way that he played, but technically they are quite similar players. And it's the unweighted backlift that makes Rohit so good. And Callis had a very similar setup with the bat as well. And you see it with some players. Stokes is a good example. Stokes picks the bat up and there's a waggle behind you, and he's trying to get that kind of energy into his shot. Now, that's fine, and that works brilliantly for him. With Rohit, he picks the bat up early, and it just sits there, slightly above the horizontal. And so what that means is you don't have to then take it back up behind you in order to get that power through. If your timing's there, you just hold it there, slightly above the horizontal, and then your body comes into the shot. And it means that because he sets like a boxer, where you can go back off, you can throw one or step back and dodge one. He's ready to play either shot, front foot drive, back foot pull, because the bat is so perfectly balanced. And the rest of it sits in there beautifully, the hands, the head, and all the rest of it. And that reminds me a little bit of Callis. As I say, Callis always, there was something quite almost sort of militaristic about his game, which perhaps didn't charm me. But technically Kallis was very good to watch in the same kind of way that Sharma is.
We were talking earlier about Rohit's demeanour, and we were talking before we started recording about, in India, a lot of people who follow a lot of T20 cricket don't believe that Rohit Sharma's in their best 11, because over the last 5 or 6 years, his IPL record is fine, but not brilliant. And there are so many young Indians. You mentioned Jaiswal, he can't get the team at the moment. Yeah. A lot of people are like, well, Jaiswal's got a much better IPL record recently. Yeah. But I felt actually quite smug watching Rohit yesterday because basically I think teams in this World Cup have sometimes fallen into the trap of putting too much on recent domestic performances, when actually I don't really care what you got in a recent league. Can you or can you not sweep Mitchell Starc for 6? Very few players in the world can do that. And you were saying that actually a part of it is Rohit's personality. Rohit isn't really the sort of, he doesn't have the intensity that a Virat Kohli has, in where he gets up for every single moment. Rohit sort of, the way he plays and the way he reacts to event undulates depending on the event's significance in a way. You get the best of Rohit when he cares, and he doesn't always care. Yeah. That makes sense.
No, bang on. And if you look in Test cricket, especially against the English, he scores important hundreds. He scores big hundreds when India need him to. He's also won 5 IPLs, right? So it's not like he's just shrugged his shoulders at the
basic guy, yeah.
But naturally, yeah, he's a human being. He's not an automaton. He's not a player that wakes up every morning and thinks, oh, God, I need to score 32 off 16. If I don't score 32 off 16 in yet another interminable IPL game, then I'm somehow gonna struggle to sleep at night. As you say, he gets his 8 hours. Don't worry about that.
I reckon it's more than 8.
Do you reckon?
Comfortably more than 8, yeah.
He has one of those sort of padded eye masks. Yeah.
I reckon he has a long list of requests for every hotel that India stay in.
But also, if he doesn't get them, he's all right with it.
Yeah.
Is he? No, surely he'd do a little Jaiswal reaction if he didn't get it.
He's not the kind of fella to kick off about it, I don't think. Yeah. I think if Hardik Pandya doesn't get exactly the rider that he requires, I don't think he's going to be happy.
Or Bumrah. Maybe Bumrah.
Bumrah will be okay. Personally, lots of speculation on this.
Not an exact science.
Do not write in. But what the point you're making about Sharma and about all of these guys who've achieved a lot in cricket is, there's a flow to their career. You can't expect them to get up every single day and think, I'm going to deliver the performance of the century, because that's part of figuring out how to be a really top level professional cricketer, is to figure out where you need to peak. And sometimes you don't need to peak.
And also, and burnout is it's the monster over the hill for cricketers, for everybody, right? But for cricketers in particular, when you live out of a suitcase, probably more extreme than any other sports person, really. That is always the lurking concern. You see it with Stokes. Stokes is a good example. Stokes does not get up for those little games because the juices only start to really flow when it properly matters.
I find it really interesting because you compare great sports people and what makes them tick very different. So like Virat Kohli, for example, 2 Spurs fans on the show, by the way. There's a bit of Harry Kane.
If we have our way.
There's a bit of Harry Kane in Virat Kohli, in there like every single game is the most important game in the world, and I'm giving 100%. And there's like an obsessiveness about them. With Sharma, I don't think that quite exists. I think it's more reactive than the others.
I'm presenting some cycling for TNT Sport. Well, for Eurosport TNT Sports, it's the same thing basically. At the moment, it's the mountain bike season, and of course they're coming up to the Olympics, right? And so this peaking conversation has been a huge one in the context of the season, because it's the mountain bike World Cup. It's a huge. If you can win the overall, it proves that you can deliver on 10 occasions rather than just a one-off. But of course, a lot of these guys and girls are thinking about the Olympics. So it's interesting to see what they can do when, they're going out to basically quite often use some of these races to figure out how they can win in Paris. And it doesn't mean that they're not delivering a really great performance. Just at the weekend, we were in Switzerland, and it was a really, really tough course. And so they have to also protect their bodies and not, get injured. But it just means it's a slightly different performance. And I think this is what we're talking about here.
Well, an interesting stat as we finish on India, no team has ever won the T20 World Cup going unbeaten. So talk about peaking at the right time. England, actually, the 2 times they've won it have nearly been knocked out straight away. So in 2010, They lost against the West Indies and were sort of saved by the rain against Ireland. And then in 2022, they lost against Ireland and had to beat Sri Lanka in the last game. They only just did it. So England...
And that's why people should stop giving so much of a shit about us not being that good in the Euros group. By the by, just by way of a small, tiny further neg on Australia, I know India haven't been catching as well so far this tournament. Australia really can't catch.
No.
And so Akshar Patel's catch was just like, oh man.
That's unbelievable.
Come on. That is what we want to see.
I think another 3 or 4 overs and Australia would have won that game.
Yeah.
Because at one point they needed 10 and over across 10 overs with 9 wickets in hand. I mean, you assume that a batting side is going to get that done, albeit Kuldeep and Bumrah are still going to send down half of those
Axel was really good as well.
Yeah. But it was, you're right, an extraordinary catch because he went with his wrong hand as well. He went with his left, realised he couldn't get it, grabbed it with his right.
How's he going to, is he going to fall? Is he going to,
Yeah,
it was amazing that the momentum of the ball didn't take him over.
Yeah.
Crazy good catch.
Briefly on India, the other opening bat, I forget his name. There's Rohit and you compared him to Harry Kane earlier.
Virat Kohli.
That's the one. Something like 110 runs at 11s or something like that. Strike rate barely a run a ball.
Yeah, I mean...
Now, obviously, it means he's due. Relax, folks. He's due. You know, come the semi-final, he's probably going to smash one.
I think it's fine. I mean,
I know it's fine, Yas. I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah. I mean, India played their group stage in incredibly strange environment of that New York pitch. I think Kohli will be fine on the truer pitches.
It's nice for you to worry about him though, Phil. Yeah. He always asks after you.
Like that.
We should talk about England. So England are through to the semi-finals after winning 2 of their 3 Super 8 games.
Silly team, aren't
they? They are yet to really click. Kate, what have you made of England's campaign so far? Obviously, they're up against a very strong-looking India, which feels a bit worrying.
Oh God!
But it's encouraging when a side who have achieved as much as England have, they are the defending champions, get to a semi-final without actually looking that good.
Yeah. Oh, man. So I mentioned Bumrah earlier. It's 4.08 economy across the whole of the tournament.
That's quite
good. Yeah.
That's quite good.
We're going to have to...
You take that in first class.
Have to score runs against that. What am I excited to see? Let's reframe this. What am I excited to see in the semi-finals? I mean, Phil Salt has been looking really, really good. Harry Brook as well. I mean,
he's your key.
He's your key. Where are we playing him? Where's he coming in? And then let's not forget Joss Buttler. Talk about all-rounders as well. People who can do everything, making catches, keeping... Yeah, pretty well, and then hitting all those sixes. Oh man, that was so much fun to watch.
He had an amazing couple of games against South Africa. England lost it, but that run out where
that's
totally from the other end,
100%, and that could have been it should have been a totally game changing moment.
I still don't really understand how we lost that South Africa game. Really.
Yeah. I think we'll get to South Africa a bit later, but I think South Africa is just a very good bowling side. I think they are. I think we associate South Africa in the past as having maybe 2 or 3 like amazing bowlers, but a couple of weaker bowlers that you can target. Whereas now there's just no weak link in that South Africa attack. And actually, you know, there's a lot of focus on is England's lower middle order good enough to finish games. It was the top order that let them down. They were so far behind the rate; it was very hard to catch up. So yeah, that was a very weird game. But I think overall, England. I don't know, Phil. What do you think? Do you think England got a chance?
Of course.
We've always got a chance.
Of course. It's 20 over cricket.
It's a lottery, guys. Why are we even bothering?
Could be a very short podcast if we went down that
some
route.
things have worked. Some things have worked less well. Salt is dangerous. He's the most sort of one-track cricketer I think I've ever seen. Like, he throws the bat at literally everything.
I don't think he does anymore. I think that's why he's gone to the next level. So I think you could unsympathetically have described Salt not that long ago as a bit of a power play merchant, like goes hard early and doesn't really construct innings that win you games. But in that West Indies game that happened in the middle of the night, so no one really watched it, but I did.
I did, to be fair.
So I will.
All right.
I will fight his call in this one. So he said after the game, his job was to go really hard early on. Then when Buttler gets out, his job is to bat through the innings. And England were chasing 180. It's a lot of runs. And there was a really strong breeze across the ground. And one of England's assistant coaches is Kieran Pollard. A lot of local knowledge. He said, when the wind is going towards the leg side boundary, try and score at 12 runs and over. When it's going towards the offside boundary, try and go 8 and over. And that's basically exactly what he did. It was really, really smart cricket.
Yeah.
And I think he's always had talent. I think he's now marrying that talent with game awareness. And like, I think since he's done that, he's been brilliant. Bairstow was very good in that game as well.
He was the player of the series in the West Indies tour in December.
Yeah.
So he was consistently delivering in a series where lots of other England players, including Jos Buttler, were not consistently delivering.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Fine.
All right.
And you know, and it's necessary that he does evolve as a player. And you know, his story becomes more and more interesting the more you think about it, I suppose. You know, after this tournament finishes, what happens next? You know, he's on record that he's interested in 4-day cricket and therefore 5-day cricket and so on and so on. But we'll probably come to that in a bit. Harry Brook's your key man for me, and he's in form, and he's your fantasy player. I would try and get him in there at 3 personally. I know that when they started with Bairstow at 4, it didn't really happen for him, and that he's less comfortable coming in the middle and having to attack the spinners straight away. I understand that, but I'd want him in there at 3 because I think the more he plays, the more he bats, the more chance you have. That South Africa game, he almost pulled that out the fire earlier in the tournament as well. He's the key difference, I think, in that middle order. He can do extraordinary things, and he can hit good bowlers out the ground. That's the key. And I think against India, they're just going to keep coming at you one after the other. And there aren't any obvious weak links really in that bowling side. Perhaps Hardik Pandya, you can get after him possibly, but I think Brook's ability is such that on his day, he can take anyone down. I think he's the most complete middle order player that England have, or the most dangerous middle order player that England have got.
Yeah.
And so I'd be trying to get him in there at 3, moving Moeen up and down the order. I can understand the point of difference with a left-hander, but it doesn't tend to work. Well, it tends to not work more than it does. I would just pin it on Brook and say, look, you're our star. You're our boy. Don't do it.
And it does feel a little bit like that test tour in India, when India will have Jadeja, Axar and Kuldeep, how England go against spinners. If the spinners start well for India, you can see England getting really bogged down. But on the England spin front, Adil Rashid has been unbelievable this tournament. He's been so good. I think he's maybe as good as he's ever been. Such
a player. Yeah. 36 years old now. One of you was saying about how you'd like to see him if he was a bit younger. You'd see him in the England test team. Is that you? Yes.
Both of us.
Yeah. We say that on a weekly basis.
We are aligned on that.
I do feel like it is a shame. I almost think like chuck him in. Why not?
Yeah.
But yeah, and this celebration as well. It's so strong. It's so like, I meant that, and you have got nothing. You've got nothing against me. He was wicked. I was going to say actually, I felt a bit frustrated about the USA game, just because I didn't really know what we learnt from that. Obviously, apart from that, Jos Buttler doesn't really like renewable energy. All those solar panels he's taking out, outrageous behaviour. But I suppose it's a fillip, it's a boost, isn't it? Just being able to have done that. And then Chris Jordan as well with his what was it he said? His nephew said, "Oh, you've got to get 3 wickets."
Is that right? So his nephew was at the ground.
Oh wow,
that's so cute.
It's the happiest he's ever looked, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I think you wrote that in the show notes, whatever. But yeah.
Sorry, Adil Rashid. That's who we should really be talking about, because he's just he's combining kind of economy with that just real confidence. And were you saying about him already, or were we talking about someone else? When he puts those balls in, and people just look at him like, that's not allowed. That's not what I.
It's amazing that like the batter knows what he's trying to do, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
stop it.
So against South Africa, that's one of the great mini spells.
Yeah.
1 for 20, I think it was. We bowled them all off the reel, and he was taunting them. He was taking the piss. Good players, really good players. You know, he should have got the cock out. So, oh God, you can't say that, can you?
It's very difficult.
The cock should have gone with a misplaced sweep. He obviously got rid of Markram with a kind of a googly stroke, sort of arm ball that never ever landed.
47 miles per hour.
Is that right? Okay, yeah. Well, it was evident, and Markram waiting an age, and the mind starts to get more scrambled, and the ball's still not anywhere near you, and then It just creeps through off a little bit of inside edge, just, beats him all ends up, really. And there's a sort of quiet authority now to Adil Rashid. Adil Rashid, when he was younger, was sort of so bashful and so self-conscious as a kid from the backwaters. Let's be honest, a kid from working class Bradford who came through the system somehow, succeeded in spite rather than because of it, as everybody knows. A homegrown, homespun kind of cricketer, and emerged almost apologetically into that England team. And I remember he was on a tour in 2009 and for the West Indies, and I was on that, not playing for some reason, but I was on it. And I remember watching him, and he was so small, like a child, and never spoke to the media, and they protected him. They put a force field around him, and that was maintained for years. Even when he was in and out the side, when he came back in, they protected him, the England setup, because he was not able, if you like, to play the game, play the media game and all the rest of it. Now, the way he just strolls around, there's just that kind of, like, he knows his own greatness. He doesn't have to prove anything again. He's a double world champion. He only plays this stuff, never bothers with anything else. He turns up, he plays these exhibition games for England. He plays half a dozen games of cricket a year. It's absolutely marvellous. But he's bowling better than ever. He's bowling better than ever. There is no change. Just let's say with Yadav, no discernible change. They were doing the split screen on the telly, the googly and the leg break, and there's only a tiny, tiny, tiny change, but the trajectory of the arm is the same. The angle comes down the same. He's
what are you
a joy.
supposed to do? What are you supposed
He's
to do?
Joy.
As Sir Alistair Cook said to me, it's all in the hands of the bowler, right? If someone's doing something like that to you, you're just a defendant.
That's it. That's it, exactly. And
the most irreplaceable England player. Like, England don't have anyone like that who could step in for him.
Yeah. I couldn't help but see this kind of the dichotomy of the England football team, bless them, sort of huffing and puffing on their latest $1 billion contracts and all of that, and it being sort of chaotic, and all of them striving for some kind of identity. And I wish them well, whatever. But on the same day, Adil Rashid, who people would not even, he's not going to get stopped down the street.
Do you reckon?
He'll get stopped down the street in Bradford, sure.
Down the street here.
We'll walk down the street in London, and one or two people might stop him in Oxford Street.
Yeah, you could say famously multicultural city. Yeah, you could say it might not be English. Sure. Stopping him.
But my point is that there's a sort of undemonstrative confidence in the bloke that is born of having done all of these things, and I just couldn't shake that contrast watching these sort of puffed up footballers. Good luck to them completely, and I'm rather fond of a lot of them, but nonetheless they were sort of running around like lunatics, trying desperately to find their own place in the world, if you like. And Adil just goes about his business, just this lad who puts the bins out, and you see him the morning after, and you nod to him, and he's a genius. He's a unshowy, undemonstrative genius.
Nick asks, scheduling a rain day for the semi-final being held in Trinidad, a country that typically sees 11 days of rain in June, but not scheduling a rain day for the semi-final being held in Guyana, where England and India are playing, a country that typically sees 23 days of rain in June.
That's a lot.
What are your thoughts?
That's a lot of rain in June.
I love cricket.
So so I was gonna ask you more generally. Yeah. What do you think about? I think there's something fundamentally unserious about cricket tournaments. So there's something like this happens, everyone just sort of shrugs their shoulders. Yeah. Whereas if this was, I know we're talking about football a lot, but if this was a football tournament, there would be uproar that there's such a difference depending on which semi-final you're in. There's a whole preceding thing that this tournament had as well. What's your impressions overall been of this tournament?
Yeah, well, because Butch, I think, was it last week or one of the recent pods was saying about how he felt like lots of these kind of structural elements about the tournament aren't discussed as widely due to various reasons. And I think not having a reserve day available, I don't know who is making decisions on that. But I mean, I sometimes think in general professional sport is a lot less professional across the board than people would like to believe, Get Deloitte in, and I'm sure it would be. I'm sure it would have plenty of rain days available for all of them. But no, I don't know. I think cricket generally, I think one of the things we like about it is that it manages to maintain a sort of, I don't want to say an amateur
It's village.
air.
It's
Yeah,
village.
that's why people like it, because they feel at home and they don't have to, I don't know.
I agree with you, and I think that is fine.
But on this specific point, yes, obviously it's stupid.
Yeah.
And I think it almost feels like, when we were doing the West Indies tour and everyone's just constantly surprised by the rain, like, yes, it rains in the West Indies, famously. It's just that...
Prepare for it.
Yeah, people... I don't know how that can be possible, and particularly given all this stuff about what we're saying about India, needing to be at a time when everyone can watch in India because that's such a big part of the audience. It's going to be a great look if it's rained off, isn't it? What's that going to do? So it's interesting that was organised so far in advance, and people do seem to have thought about that, but they don't seem to have thought about these very simple practicalities.
Yeah, so the justification essentially was that second semi-final is too close to the final. So for performance reasons, they want to ensure that teams don't travel play on consecutive days. Although there's no reserve day, they can go on incredibly late on the Thursday game before it's called off. So even though it's a 3:30 start, the game can actually finish at 11:30 UK time.
That's what we want. That's exactly what we want.
There could be unprecedented levels of just waiting and watching the rain.
Yeah. Sort of US Open stuff. Yeah.
Not good. Genuinely not good.
Both games.
I think the one in Trinidad's broadly fine, and
it's the home of Brian Lara, isn't it?
Trinidad, yeah. And the one in Ghana, where England are playing, not as good.
Yeah, I'm no mathematician, but I feel like 23 out of 30-ish days is a lot. It's a big proportion.
It is a big proportion.
It's a big proportion.
As mentioned earlier, there's no harm in saying it again. Australia are out. So Afghanistan are in a World Cup semi-final for the first time after beating Australia on Saturday night and then beating Bangladesh in a close one yesterday. It's a very, very fun finish in the Bangladesh game where there's a bit of time wasting from Gulbuddin Naib. And then...
Did you love that? Or did you hate that?
No, that was very funny. So he basically goes down and then, claiming he's got cramp, etc. And then 5-10 minutes later, he's running faster than anyone else in the celebrations, which I suppose can happen with cramp.
Get a few electrolytes on board.
Yeah, very possible. But Afghanistan is through. They beat Australia for the first time ever on Saturday.
An amazing game of cricket.
Yeah. I'll just quickly run through how they got there. So Ramanura and Ibrahim Zadran, the exciting Afghanistan opening pair. Afghanistan, unlike any other side really, are so reliant on those two getting runs. And on this occasion, they got 118 out of Afghanistan's 148. That was the latest Australia have ever taken their first wicket in a T20 in the 16th over. And then they defended it reasonably comfortably with Gulbuddin, the star, in a different way, taking 4 for 20, bowling lots and lots of cutters. Another stat for you, Australia are the 45th country that Mohammad Nabi has beaten whilst playing for Afghanistan.
I saw the list.
In international cricket, which is absolutely incredible. And first, just on their achievement, Phil, it's an incredible rise. 20 years ago, they weren't playing any form of professional cricket. 15 years ago, they were just playing World Cups for the first time. They could genuinely win this. They're a winnable semi-final away from a final.
My mate Jeffers has put a bet on at the start of the tournament for Afghanistan to win it. So he was up last night, watched the whole thing. It's no longer a curio, is it? It's not a novelty. It's not something that we sort of rather patronisingly but well intentionally say, isn't this an extraordinary story? It's gone past that now. They're just a really well balanced cricket team. They lack a middle order star. Nabi's obviously a seasoned pro in there, but they missed maybe a number 4. But aside from that, as you say, they've got a brilliant opening pair. They've got mystery spinners. They've got pace up top as well. The delivery to get rid of Travis Head in that game from Naveen, pitched on leg stump on the angle round the wicket, and then somehow jags back like an off break, like a ragging off break to take his off stump, and Head bursts out laughing because it's such a ridiculous piece of work. So they have talent everywhere. Noor Ahmed's a brilliant young talent. Rashid Khan is a world star, but they have class now in their team. It's not that you watch them and you think that they've got a bit of pluck and a bit of courage. They've just got a quality cricket team. And so that Australia game, they caught well as well. They fielded out of their boots. that Australia game was a fair result. It wasn't a flash in the pan thing, and it wasn't down to one or two players. It was a team effort. And so you're right; they can go ahead and win this thing. The not the tragedy, but the sadness of it, the human sadness of it, is that when talking about it, there's always there's a ... to something else, and we can't look at their brilliance in isolation, which is a great shame on so many levels. And it's a great shame for those individuals. It's a great shame for the story of world cricket. It's a great shame for the development of the game in emerging nations. And of course, it's a great shame for the individuals concerned on both sides of this story.
Yeah.
Intriguingly and beautifully, a number of the female players, the exiled female players, Afghanistani players who, of course, infamously can't represent their country, are sending congratulations to the male players. So they are, in their hearts and minds, in solidarity with their male counterparts. The tragedy for them is that they are stuck on the sidelines.
Well, let's get to that ... So we talked about it before in the podcast, and now that the men's team have achieved something they've never have done before, I think it's the right time to bring it up again, and that's the juxtaposition of the men's side success with the total abandonment of the women's program and the players within it. It's a complicated story, and we're going to be covering it in a bit more detail on the Women's Cricket Podcast later in the week. But here's some background before we get into it. So when the Taliban took over in Afghanistan in 2021, Afghanistan's female cricketers were forced to flee the country, and several of them found sanctuary in Australia. When the players were fleeing Afghanistan and looked for help, the Afghanistan Cricket Board didn't assist them at all, in some cases even blocking the contact details of the women's team. Those players in Australia have received no support from the Afghanistan Cricket Board and minimal, at best, support from the ICC. Why does this matter? Well, Afghanistan are a full member nation of the ICC and get all the funding that comes with it and all the funding that comes with getting to a World Cup semi-final. And one of the prerequisites for full membership is that you have a women's side and pathways around that. Pre-Taliban takeover, Afghanistan was starting to put a genuine professional structure in place. And it's a very complicated story for many, many reasons. And obviously anyone involved with Afghanistan cricket in any capacity will have understandable concerns around their safety of not only themselves, but their family. So it makes speaking out from an Afghanistan perspective quite difficult. Kate, there's a lot going on there, but how uncomfortable are you with that juxtaposition?
Yeah, I mean, like Phil, I'm delighted to see this. I love an underdog story. Obviously, I've enjoyed so much watching Afghanistan's men play like this, become this proper team that can go toe to toe with these storied nations who've had funding for years and years and years and have all the resources. And if you look at the kind of stats of the top players in the whole T20 World Cup so far, there's like 2 of the 3 top wicket takers are men of Afghanistan. Top run scorers, Gurbaz, who I didn't know a lot about him before this tournament. Zadran's in there as well. It's always so cool to watch what are small nations who've not had this backing do well. And of course, it's always nice to watch people beat Australia. Let's be real. It's great that you guys are pointing out about the context of it, because clearly I'm female. Imagine so it's not hard for me to imagine being female in Afghanistan and trying to play cricket and knowing that would be completely impossible for me, and also would put my life at risk. Playing cricket, having a team in East London that I play with whenever I can, has been one of the most great things in life. That kind of team. There's all sorts of articles about, playing team sport changes your professional capabilities, changes your life, changes your ability to bond with people across. Anyway, this is just what's good about it in the UK. Imagine how significant it is to women in Afghanistan. And I think you mentioned the point about the ICC. So to be a full member nation, the ICC's own rules say that they have to have a women's cricket team and they have to have pathways for them. So what's the point of the rules, guys? What is the point? These are your own rules. I mean, you didn't even have to make them. You didn't even have to pretend that you cared about this point. But given that you have, it really does take the piss out of what you're doing here, really, if you're not applying this at all. And people will say, I suppose it's a very different thing with Ukraine, but, people talk about Ukraine being in the Euros and how it's important for people to keep talking about the nation. And I completely agree with that. And I completely see that from an Afghanistan perspective. But I would also say that one of the important things that was done during the apartheid era in South Africa was for teams to stop playing their international, particularly rugby team and cricket teams. That was the power that other nations had. They couldn't go in there and sort of practically change things, but they could say, sport is a privilege and you haven't earned the right because of how you're treating a vast proportion of your population. Well, I would say that the situation is the same here. The way that Afghanistan's women are being treated is beyond awful. I've got kind of...
And the parallels are absolutely incontrovertible, right? They are. If we laud the sporting isolation that was enforced on apartheid era South Africa, and if we recognise that played some part in the fall of that regime, which is accepted thought now, then we can't disassociate what's happening in Afghanistan from what happened back then. We can't. There's no daylight between them.
And I think there's a very specific funding thing right now.
Right,
so
well, I was going to come to this. So this is not insignificant. Yeah. Sorry to jump over you, but this is important. The notion that this happens in a vacuum and that the Taliban exist detached from the ACB, the Afghanistan Cricket Board, and if anything, the Afghanistan Cricket Board are kind of in defiance of the Taliban. Well, that's not how it works. And the more we read about it and the more we learn about it, money coming into the ACB, should Afghanistan's men's team win this tournament, is not insignificant. That's a lot of money into the pot. And the tentacles linking the Taliban to the ACB are not imagined. They are there. And the more we tacitly accept this state of affairs, the more legitimacy is given to the Taliban's attempts to try and kind of
normalize
their role, right? The risk of kind of getting fucking geopolitical on it all.
Well, it is. Sport is politics.
Since 2021, the Taliban have tried to, if you like, take some of the poison out of their brand, if you like. Now, as we know, sports washing is the name of the game these days, and it's hard to disassociate that idea from what we're seeing here, right? Is that fair?
No, I think it's 100% fair. I think
it's so difficult because your heart is broken for those boys, right? To be talking about
and also, the reason why I find it really complicated is I agree with everything that's been said so far, but at the same time, it is extraordinary what the guys have achieved, and they have gone through. But
two things can be true at once. Two things can be true at once, right?
Remember Rashid Khan was playing in England when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, and he was heartbroken. He was playing a game of cricket 24 hours after his country was taken over by the Taliban, and he was absolutely heartbroken. It's a heartbreaking situation for the men's team as well. But I completely agree with both of what you're saying. It's a very practical issue, actually. It's like, what are you doing with this money?
It's practical.
Where is this money going?
That is actually
is it $17 million, I think?
And that's pre what they get in this World Cup.
Yeah.
So it's a significant amount of money, and both the ICC and the ACB, and we're going to hear from someone involved in the Afghanistan story later in the week in the women's cricket show, haven't done enough. And it's interesting when you talk about boycotting. Australia have the firmest stance on it, and England have joined them. It is Australia who have been the most involved in the Afghanistan women's story.
Yeah.
It's them who have found a home for the Afghanistan players. So the most qualified people to have a stance on it have chosen that stance.
Great point. Yeah.
And I think that is quite interesting. And And yeah, in terms of where we go next, there's probably not enough scrutiny on where that money actually goes.
Yeah, that's the final point I'd just make about that is to agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying about the money. You look at this, if you think about this situation, there was a brilliant series of photos that came out not long after the Taliban took over of women who had played sports in Afghanistan in the run up to what had happened, and then they in the, I guess, Photoshop or editing, they'd removed their kit, and then they dressed them in a burqa, because that is the practical reality of what has happened over the last few years. And my heart just, without being able to do things practically, without being able to access education, let alone sport, to just get endorphins and get out there and the things that we all here take for granted and have access to. We could literally walk out there today in any outfit we chose and go and do that. This is not about me saying, people should not wear religious dress. This is not about me saying, I'm going to come over there and change your culture because what I believe in the West is right. This is about a specific instance of women basically just existing in a space that is being defined for them by people who have no interest in their prosperity. And it's the question of, God, that breaks your heart. What small thing can we do to help that? Well, in the case of the ICC, they have really missed doing anything.
Yeah.
Just if obviously this is so difficult, and it's an issue that gets a lot of coverage from our listeners and viewers and so on, and as it should. But if there's any sense of this happening beyond our understanding, just read Katia Whitney's piece on Wisden.com, where she spoke to a number of Afghanistan female cricketers who ended up in Australia. If they come for me, will they kill me? Is essentially the title of the piece.
Yeah,
go and find it on Wisden.com. And that humanizes this case. That puts people right in the heart of it. This is not some abstract story about money, about structures. This is about human beings. And if you're in any doubt about the impact of this position, this policy, and this moral abnegation on the part of the ICC in particular, then just go and read that. Go and read that piece.
Well, next up, Mark Butcher is on the big questions. Should Tom Hartley play in Guyana? And who should take the gloves for England for the first test of the summer? Butch, the 4 semi-finalists are confirmed. England versus India on Thursday afternoon UK time, and Afghanistan versus South Africa on Thursday morning. 2 mouth-watering semi-finals for different reasons. How do you rate England's chances? Because India look ominous.
Oh man, India looks so good. But I mean, as I said from the outset, England have got enormous amounts of talent and skill in their team as well. And given a fair wind, decent pitch, good decision at the toss, all those types of things, then it's 50-50. But India's performance in the group stage and throughout really has been absolutely ominous. Whereas whenever we've been up against one of the better teams, we've faltered. So I mean that's the situation at the moment. India's form is fantastic. They haven't made a misstep just as yet. Semi-final is a good place to do that. And in England, you don't really know how they're playing because they've played the weaker teams off the park. And have been average against the better ones. So at the moment, you'd have to say India are favourites.
It feels like England have been working out what combination of players they want throughout the tournament. They haven't been 100% settled just yet. One player who's been in and out the side a little bit, Chris Jordan, took a hat-trick against America. A proper hat-trick, by the way, all 3 balls hitting the stumps. That's probably the happiest I've seen Chris Jordan in an England shirt. It's such a lovely moment on his, he's from Barbados, brought up there, doing it at the Kensington Oval. And after a difficult year or so in international cricket, what a moment that was.
Yeah, my love for CJ is very well known, having handed him his first Surrey cap back in, crikey, when the hell was that? 2007, as a 16-year-old just out of Dulwich School. And so, yeah, I couldn't be more delighted for him. And I still think, as I thought at the very beginning, that he actually makes England's best 11. Obviously, gives them batting depth, brilliant fielder, and is a specialist death bowler. And so therefore, with Archer back in the team, I'd have him in front of Mark Wood in our semi-final 11. But we'll see. I mean, they might decide to go with full pace again. I think that would be an error. But England have chopped and changed all the way through, not least in the batting order, really. Obviously, Mo's batted 3, Johnny's batted 3, Brooke has batted 4, Brooke has batted 5. The whole thing doesn't seem to have a sort of settled feel to it, which again is a little bit of a concern. Despite all of that, we've made it to the semi-finals by hook or by crook. So, as I've said, if the great thing is that Butler and Salt at the top have both scored runs and both scored them in a really dominating fashion. They get you off to a flyer, and then England will kind of mix and match that middle order to suit whatever the situation is. The one thing I suppose that was highlighted, in the loss was the fact that they kind of got close, and then the finishers didn't finish, as has been the case. Much documented on this podcast and everywhere else. So, did wonderful things to get them close to it, but then neither of them were there at the end to see it through. So that, again, that's another slight concern.
One possible curveball selection-wise, they're playing the semi-final against India and Guyana. It's one of the more spin-friendly venues. And you look at that England team that was picked for the last game against the States, and Sam Curran and Chris Jordan fulfill similar-ish roles in the side, both light bowling at the death, both very capable low-order hitters. I wonder, especially given that India have a right-hand heavy top order, that we might see not just a first appearance of the World Cup, but a T20I debut for Tom Hartley. England have seen a lot of Hartley in close quarters in other formats, and they've liked what they've seen. I don't think it's impossible that Hartley gets a debut in a semi-final.
Yeah, I've seen that reported elsewhere as well. And yeah, it's entirely possible. I mean, you would imagine that India would go for almost a full complement of spin bowlers against us. And again, without seeing the surface, it's difficult to tell. But Guyana generally sort of favours the slower the bowling and the more side spin on it, the better. So yeah, it's definitely a possibility. And I think if you were going to swap out Sam Curran in those circumstances, those would be good ones to do it. And also, I've kind of been feeling to myself all the way through that sort of England's sort of specialist batting. You could make a case for playing another batter in there. However, Livingston's sort of almost heroics kind of sort of shut the door on that. But up until that point, he hadn't really been doing much bowling. And you kind of think, well, if he's not going to bowl, then maybe you want to get, there's a place for Ben Duckett in the side to play an actual specialist extra batter just to bolster the order a little bit. But I doubt that will happen. Tom Hartley is a more likely scenario.
Moving on to the Test Summit, which actually only starts in 2.5 weeks' time, pretty much. By the time we record next week, England might have already announced their squad for the first Test of the summer against West Indies. Obviously, Jimmy Anderson's last Test match. If you looked on social media, the debate that people are most interested in is, as always, who takes a glove. Yeah. And even more so than usual, there are loads of options that actually you can convince yourself that they sound pretty viable. How do you see it? Ollie Robinson, he's sort of flavour of the month at the moment. He got 198 yesterday against a very strong Essex attack. He's regarded as a competent gloveman and averages 92 this season. Jamie Smith's another option. Phil Salt, Johnny Bairstow, Ben Folkes. How do you see it?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. I mean, so obviously Johnny kept wicket, probably wasn't fit enough to do so in the Ashes last year, but now you would say that issue is not a problem, and so that's the easiest solution, I suppose. But you're right. If they were to look to change it up, then Ollie Robinson is making an incredible case for himself. Quick scoring, very competent wicket keeper. and would sort of suit that fast scoring role for Baz Ball down the order. Ben Folkes, it looks as though, unless we're playing on the subcontinent, then he's probably has moved down the pecking order. And I know that James Smith is incredibly popular for all of the similar reasons. For Robinson, really, very, very fine batter. I'm not sure his keeping is quite there yet. It certainly pales in comparison to that of Ben Folkes. But he's been getting plenty of game time with the gloves for Surrey over the course of the early part of the championship. So there are a lot of cases to be made for a lot of people, and even somebody like Phil Salt, who of course is doing himself no harm by being in the T20 team, playing brilliantly, has a very decent record over the last couple of years in Championship cricket. And has expressed a real desire to want to move up into the Test game as well. So there are a lot of choices. I guess my feeling is that Bairstow will keep. It makes life a bit easier in terms of balancing the team, but they'll be keeping a very, very close eye, I would think, on Smith and Robinson, and probably more Robinson at the moment.
Before the summer, they obviously made the huge decision to effectively move Anderson on. The justification there is they got an eye on the future, not just the Ashes next year, but that 5-test series at home to India. And I wonder if they'll be close to making a similar call on Bairstow. Maybe not at the start of the summer, but maybe later on. He'll be 36 for that Ashes tour next year. He'll turn 36 in September 2025. And he did have a very tough tour of India with the bat. So it's a weird one because the last time he was England's keeper bat, he actually did a pretty good job over the course of the series. But the last time he played for England, he had a very difficult tour of India. And it feels like he, almost more than anyone else now that Anderson and Broad have retired, that's the player that England will have to make a decision on one way or the other relatively soon.
And again, I'd almost be inclined that if that's the way they're thinking, to kind of make that decision sooner rather than later, because there's a very good chance that if Johnny plays as a keeper batter or just as a batter, that he has a very good summer back at home against the West Indies and Sri Lanka. And then you're left with a situation whereby, you've gone another English summer without trying out any of the new kids on the block. You'd be less inclined then to make a big call around an Ashes series in another year's time to throw somebody in who's had very little game time. So it's a tough one. From my point of view, I still think, and I've stood by this for a long time, that Johnny, the year that he had as a number 5 without keeping wicket, sort of justifies my view that if he plays as a batter, and you pick somebody else to keep wicket. He is less likely, as the numbers have shown over a long period of time, he's less likely to score you the type of runs that he's capable of scoring if he's keeping wicket as well. The innings after keeping wicket, say the second innings of a Test match. So the call for me would be to try and plug in a keeper that they think is going to go to Australia now. And if Johnny plays, he plays as a batter only.
I guess it's just quite difficult to squeeze Bairstow in the side as a batter, given that you got a pretty settled top 6.
That's the issue.
I mean, it's an age-old debate, one that predates your playing career. What do you want from your keeper? What traits do you most look for? And what's very interesting is when you go through all those names, the balance is slightly different on each player. Looking ahead to what England have coming up in 2025, would you want someone who keeps every week for their county, is an exceptional keeper? Not first, because if you did that, I suppose Ben Folkes would be at the top of the queue. But how do you balance what you want from someone as a number 7 with the bat and someone behind the stumps?
I think the argument has moved on, rightly or wrongly. I think that argument is now that if you're not contributing major runs, big runs, and essentially for England, sort of quick runs with the bat, then you almost rule yourself out from selection. And given the way that England are kind of, particularly around Stokes, whether Stokes can play a full part as an all-rounder, etc. Given the difficulty they had balancing the team last time, which is why Johnny ended up taking the gloves again. They would want, if you're drawing a line through things and starting again, they would want to plug somebody in there that wouldn't cause them that issue should there be a problem with one of the all-rounders in the team. Somebody that can more than hold their own with the bat, be capable of scoring hundreds with the bat, doing it relatively quickly, and being a competent wicketkeeper. I mean, look, so Matt Pryor is a prime example of somebody like that. He ended up averaging 40 in Test match cricket. Started off as a pretty shaky wicketkeeper and became an incredibly good one by the time he was done. But was always a batter first almost. And England's options all sort of centre around that, barring Ben Foakes. I'm a big fan of Ben Foakes. Everybody is a big fan of Ben Foakes as a wicketkeeper. But in terms of the way that his place in an England team and the way that they're looking to play, it makes him less and less likely to get in front of guys who are considered to be, let's say, more effective with the bat. And it's the reason that argument is always a difficult one to make is that when Ben Foakes has played and had an extended run in the team in places that aren't on the subcontinent, he has done a very, very good job for England with the bat in a different way, perhaps from the way that somebody like Bairstow at 7 or Robinson at 7 or Pryor at 7 might have done it, but has kind of added some ballast to a batting lineup that was a lot of crash bang wallop. At least then you had somebody that might be able to build a partnership with a set middle order batter over a long period of time. So he has much greater attributes than being, he's not Bob Taylor. He's not batting 11 and just keeping wicket, But the game has kind of shifted to a point whereby if you have other options, if you have more striking options as batter keepers, then that is the way that selection is likely to go.
Yeah, I suppose with Foakes, it's specifically when he's batting with the tail that is where he has struggled to move games on. It's actually even in that India tour, even though he didn't get a substantial score, there are a couple of times where he's involved in really crucial partnerships with top order players. It's just that it feels like
when it's the other way round. Yeah,
exactly.
When it's the other way round, then of course you end up with a situation where he's unable to do what some of the other guys might do. So all of these things are kind of a little bit you give with one hand and you take away with the other. But again, I think with an eye to when people get capped for England nowadays, right? And with bowlers, it's always different because of injuries and having to rest and rotate and all these things. But when batters and keepers or whatever get given the opportunity now, the opportunity is there for, at least 10 test matches. You're not sort of shipping people in and out in the way that they used to in the past. And so that gives, if you make a decision now to play one of the uncapped guys, Salt, Smith, Robinson, then they will have time to bed in. They will understand very quickly the sort of like the difference in terms of the scrutiny and the concentration required in test match cricket, which will then elevate their keeping skills. In ways that have happened to Bairstow and the aforementioned Matt Pryor. And by the time you get round, within the space of a year and a half, you've got 15 to 20 test matches under your belt, and suddenly you've made an investment in a player that can be around for a very long time, doing exactly what the team wants you to do. So, look, it's a tough call, and I haven't given you a definitive answer because I don't think there is one. But my inclination would be that you start with one of these new guys now, and don't leave it to a situation where either Bairstow's form goes or whatever it might be, and then suddenly you're scrambling around for a replacement with zero cricket under their belt on the eve of a Test match Ashes series.
Well, we've got a fascinating week in store, both on the pitch and off the pitch. But next time we chat, England could be world champions.
That what they could well be. They could well be, and it would be utterly extraordinary. They're going to have to put two games together that they haven't managed to play so far against high class opposition, and of course we got the added frisson of either South Africa or Afghanistan making their first World Cup final, which is extraordinary. I mean, South Africa. I know we weren't going to go there, but South Africa have been absolutely extraordinary. And I don't know whether that raises the pressure on them or not. They're unbeaten in the tournament. They've looked, they've won a lot of close games. So either, you know, their luck is going to run out, or they're going to batter somebody in the semi-final and the final, and finally win one, because they're such a good team. They've got so much talent all the way through. Markram is a very, very fine leader. And, you know, you wouldn't begrudge them running away with one of these finally and putting the chokers tag to bed for once and for all.
Yeah, that semi-final will be brilliant because you've got two very, very strong bowling attacks, which is not normally what you see at this stage of a T20 tournament. So I think that game should be absolutely amazing. As you say, the winner of that is the first time T20 World Cup finalist. So yeah, lots to play for. Anyway, that's it for this week. Cheers, Butch. Catch you next time. For this episode's Kia's Movement That Inspires moment, Kia, proud sponsors of the Kia Oval, are giving you the chance to win a pair of tickets to the greatly anticipated Women's T20I between England and New Zealand. Last year, the England-Australia game at the Kia Oval in the Ashes was absolutely fantastic, an amazing night, great atmosphere all round, broke attendance records for an England game, an England bilateral game. So you can be there yourself this year to experience history again. For a chance to win, all you need to do is enter via the link in the description. Very quickly, ZY, I think this guy's name is, can we just have Phil for a minute or two on that Dan Lawrence over yesterday?
Oh man, the conflict.
So if you haven't seen it, Dan Lawrence hit Shoaib Bashir for 5 6s in a row yesterday in an over that eventually went for 38. And the 5 6s came off the first 5 balls. The third shot in particular was absurd.
Was that the one over straight-ish mid-wicket? Yeah.
No, actually, that was it was an incredibly wide ball that he somehow hit.
Oh,
straight.
right, the one that he still slapped past him over long on. Yeah, that was filth. Absolute filth. It should be banned. Put out after the watershed. So he's starting to grow into his role, isn't he?
Mm.
It pains me to say, but he really is. He's simmered away in the T20 stuff for the last half a dozen games. He's not really nailed that at all. He's been given the gig to open the batting. His bowling's been more effective. But as a red ball player for Surrey, in at 6, which I think is quite interesting in the context of England as well.
Mm.
He's now made 200s and a good 90 or an 80 something. And he has that sort of, that imperious thing. He's a charismatic cricketer, and England like those kinds of cricketers. They like cricketers with attitude. They like cricketers with a bit of edge. They like cricketers who can do lots of different things. They like cricketers with a bit of swag, and he's got the lot. If that's the requirement. What he doesn't yet have is the cold hard numbers to justify.
But he's got the numbers this year.
This is what I'm coming to say. Yeah, he was averaging 49 going into this match, and he's, I think, 175 yesterday quickly, with that, if you like, day-changing, game-changing explosivity after he's got himself in. He did it for Essex a couple of times. I remember one game in particular against Derbyshire when he did a similar thing, and he took 20-something off and over. Well, he's gone one step further here. There's clearly, as well, an element that he spent a winter with Shoaib Bashir. Shoaib Bashir is a very, very good young bowler. And so, as we were talking about earlier, the good players, they get up for the big moments. And he will have known full well that he was in a subplot scrap with England, perhaps England's best young spinner, and that Lawrence was going to take him down. And once the first one went over, then he's only going to go harder and harder and harder. If it means that he runs past one and gets out for 130, then so be it.
Yeah.
But he has an eye. He has an eye on the spectacular. This is why they like him.
It'll be very interesting to see if he's in that first England squad of the summer.
Well, look. If you can make a case for it that if Stokes is bowling, Stokes bats 6 and he's bowling, then you can make a case that Lawrence gets into that side as possibly a spinner on a seam-heavy pitch, or as a support spinner on a spin-heavy pitch. And you can make that case now if Stokes is back and bowling. If Stokes isn't bowling, then it's a different story. But they can definitely make a case that he could work as a kind of floater fantasy player in there at 7, maybe even there at 8. It will hinge again on what they do with the keeper and all the rest of it. But there is increasingly a case to be made. And look, much as it's a dagger in my heart, the move to Surrey to foreground is bowling. He bowled 26 overs on day one of the summer in early April, and to bat him at 6 in that kind of hinge position, that fulcrum position. He's not a number 3. He's not even a number 4. He's too loose for that. But he's a devil at 6, and it makes a hell of a sense. He's a saucy devil at 6, and it makes increasing sense. Surrey do things right, don't they? That week after week, it just makes sense what they do. It's a very, very well planned club, and Lawrence, he's just sprinkling a little bit of that Essex into their setup and greasing those wheels. And it breaks my heart every day. It breaks my heart.
Subscribe now to Phil Walker's voice notes on Dan Lawrence.
I think
I wish him well.
Limit yourself to 5 minutes or get the full 10-minute piece.
Premium charges.
I think if we ever went Patreon, I think that'd probably be the first thing we do.
Wake him up in the morning.
Phil's 10-minute.
Good morning. Lawrence. This is your daily 5 minutes on Dan Lawrence.
That's a good idea, you know.
I
don't think demand's probably as high as we might
write in. Let us know. How much are you willing to pay? Per month, or would you want a daily? Buy us a coffee every week.
I think we probably start weekly, and sort of go from there.
Yeah, why not? That is the brand.
Yeah.
I'm there for you, whatever you need.
Kate, over the last few years, TNT Sport have become an increasingly significant player in the television broadcasting of cricket, and you're a very big part of that.
Thanks.
I have several questions.
Okay.
My first question, though, is what is it like spending a week in Stockholm with Steve Finn and Alistair Cook?
More than a week.
It
was like 4 weeks. It was like a month nearly, because we ended up doing. You're referring to where the studio was located for the India Test tour. Yeah, as I think quite often happens with some of those India rights, they were decided very, very late.
Yes,
and so by that point, there was no. So Warner Brothers own all of TNT and Eurosport. And so there was no available studios in the UK that they owned. So there was a really good one out in Stockholm, and off we trotted. Yeah, it was sort of like because of course India as well. So we're getting, I think my call time on the first day was 1:30 a.m. And so then it was this kind of like twilight experience of, sort of a bit like during the day, kind of a sort of a stag. I don't know. I don't want to call it a stag, but that's maybe not the right way of putting it. But, you're in Stockholm with the lads. You're chatting about cricket. Yeah. You're sort of a bit sleep deprived. Yeah. Go for a couple of drinks in the afternoon, talk a bit more, and then go to bed very, very early in my case. I think these guys are better at not sleeping than I was. But I was like, going to bed at sort of 6. Yeah. Because otherwise you couldn't.
That's still quite late for a 1:30 start.
You just couldn't do it. Yeah, you just couldn't do it. So I don't think, unfortunately, as a result of the timings, it wasn't, I can't give you any like wild stories of all the really good stuff that we got up to. I will say though that Stockholm is obviously a lovely place. I don't know if you guys have been, but we went for a couple of drinks one day in just like what to me is like it was like a shopping mall, but it was like there was this beautiful DJ man there, and there was like just everyone was stunning, and it was like 3 PM, but we were just sitting there in what here would be like, sort of a big Tesco, and it was like glowing, and it's quite a special place. In terms of the cricket coverage, we were just basically in a green box for 12 hours a day, which is a bit of a head fuck.
Being the TV anchor is a really important part of the TV viewing experience. You've got the Euros on right now, and it almost feels like Gary Lineker's part of the family. He's a family friend who you see every day before a game. What was it like first getting that gig at TNT? What were your initial feelings? Because it's such a big part of a cricket fan's experience. Yeah,
it really is. And I think, so the first one I did was the West Indies tour, which is a bit more kind of chilled. It's a bit of a fun run up to Christmas, and everyone's, we've got a Christmas tree in the studio, and Carlos Brathwaite's like hanging out, and it's more of a relaxed vibe. Whereas if you're doing an India Test tour, that's like pretty serious. And in terms of career ambitions, like I don't know if I could have said, at the start of my career, like I'm gonna target presenting a Test tour. Like that's just so bloody massive. I felt it kind of one thing built to the next, right? I as I said, I do a lot of the cycling coverage for these guys, and it kind of the timings started to fit together, and then you start to realize there's some cricket available and it's growing. They were one of the guys who produces in fact, the guy who produces the coverage is well, he's really great, and he wanted to kind of make a little show around some of the women's cricket that subsequently came up. So The Edge is a show that's now going to continue after the summer as well, which we're really excited about.
It definitely looked like the coverage had moved on a piece, for the women's stuff in New Zealand and so on.
I think also because, well, I don't know, this is me just speculating, you know, with kind of serious what I'm calling serious test cricket, you sort of just need to put in place like a couple of good pundits and like someone who can hold it together in like an organized and semi-authoritative way. I think probably the average cricket fan would be a bit nervous if there was like something special going on for the India Test tour. Do you know what I mean?
Test cricket is sacrosanct. You've got to be careful.
Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying that was their decision. I'm just saying that is
like a marble
what
vase.
I think.
Like a marble vase.
You've got to just be very polite. You've got to be kind to it. You've got to respect that the what's important here is the cricket, as you always are. But you have to just make that very clear. It was simple. It was simple the way it was done. But the point is, Stephen and Cookie are really good pundits. They had a lot to say, and for me as well, presenting sport and watching live sport, I just like hearing good chat around it. I don't necessarily need, but if I'm a potential viewer, I would feel more welcomed in by something like The Edge, where it's kind of explaining to you what's going on.
Do you think that, because you work in different sports, I'm quite interested to hear what is different about cricket, both in terms of its coverage, but also what its fandom is like? Because I think, you know, the way you talk about Test cricket there, cricket full stop, I think is guilty of being quite an exclusive space. It's like, this is how we do it.
Yeah.
And you don't, and change is a bad thing. Change is viewed with suspicion all the time.
Generally is so conservative, man. Like all of it is, even the stuff you wouldn't think. So the mountain bike, so I'm the anchor for this mountain bike tour. You know, half of it is downhill mountain bike, which is like the seriously radical stuff where you're throwing yourself down a mountain, and these guys have all got millions of guys and girls have all got millions of followers on Instagram, and people, you know, watching them do all these incredible things. They're really like cutting edge, not just in what they're trying to do technically, but also in terms of how they're using media. And that the audience there is like, there was a change from the previous guy to me. The audience there is extremely conservative. Like they don't necessarily want, it's sport. People want to feel like they know what's going on and they want it to continue to be the same each week, and they don't want to have generally. But I think actually once you kind of show that you respect what's going on and that you have an understanding of the heritage of the sport, even if you, you know, in my case, I haven't played in international cricket. I think that you have to sit alongside the fan. That's what I see my job as being. And I think the best commentators do that as well. You're saying, I'm a fan, not in the sense that I'm going to like be partisan about all this, but that I really get why you love this. And I know I'm not some special thing coming in and, you know, telling you what's what. I'm just here to try and make your viewing a nice, comfortable experience, and perhaps to hopefully pick out a few things that might be new. And then also, I see my job as anchor is to just bring the best possible out of the pundits. So especially when it's 2 a.m, you know, like you've got to try and, I think, just really listen and talk to them a lot before and during. I mean, what a treat. Honestly, like it was just jokes sitting there and listening to these guys and getting them to, because I've taken up cricket fairly recently, and so I was getting them to talk to me about batting and like how to. Anyway, it's wicked.
So during that 2 hour session, I guess it will come back to you at drinks right after an hour. But for that hour, are you all still just sitting there just studying the cricket?
Yeah,
because I just thought, you know, like you'd watch a bit, but you'd go to the green room, you'd have a coffee, you'd call your mum or whatever, you know, and the cricket kind of happens over there. You could
call your mum. You could call your mum if you needed to, or like, you know. If
I can imagine Cookie's still lasered in, isn't he?
Well, this is all, you know, behind the scenes.
Indeed, yeah, no, sure.
No, I think our producer on that, Lucy, she's great as well. She's done a lot of cricket, Channel 4 in particular, and she wanted sometimes us to pop into the commentary as well, like if some big moment happened, just to like get Finney's take on, you know, how the ball, whatever. So Also, there wasn't really loads of places to go, but it was bloody freezing outside. And we were fundamentally kind of in an office building. Yeah. So we would like trot out of our green room occasionally. But in some cases, you did just get a bit like woozy with it all. You had to make really good notes. This is something Finney showed me. Like, you just, even if you think even if it's something obvious, like the total at drinks or something, you have to make sure you've written it down and you've put a big bloody colour around it.
If you get a decimal point out of place, then you're done.
It's just
in the cricket family, you'll never work again.
The great thing about cricket pundits, I think, is that what I didn't think about before doing the India series is that when they're playing Test cricket, they're not allowed to have their phones. So they really learn how to chat for 8 hours.
That's interesting, though. Yeah, but I think cricket lends itself to sort of rambling conversations, right? Perhaps more than any other sport out there. There's, again, referencing football, but rugby as well is another good example, right? There's a sort of visceral thrill to the thing, if that's your bag. But a lot of football talk is sort of endlessly cliche. And I know that it all fills the airways and good luck to us all. But with cricket, it's a more natural source of conversation, in part because a lot of the time you're not playing the thing and it goes on for so long, it goes on for a week. And so what you do through the night, again, like you're talking 8 hours, right? From the start to the end, 8 hours. And then you do the same thing day 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it has to have its own sort of mad, unfathomable language and its own customs and norms and all that sort of stuff in order for the thing to actually, maintain its energy, right? So look, all power to you. That's all I've got to say. All power to you, because it can't be easy. It cannot be easy.
But it's wicked. I mean, most
you must have a sense of responsibility, right?
This is it's the most amazing. Right? Of course, Test
of course. Cricket, man.
There's
nothing else quite
myself.
like
Obviously,
it.
I was.
Yeah. Quite right too.
Yeah, no, I think also doing this job, the main thing that I know is it's not about you. So in a sense, you can only do your best. You can only prep as hard as you can given the time that you've got, and you can only, like I said, try and make it a nicer experience for the guys next to you and the people watching at home, and just treat it with respect. And I mean that across all sports. You're absolutely right to say that cricket has a different pace to it, of course. And I think, I don't know, you could probably do some study about it in terms of like beats per minute, the way people would talk. But certainly, it's much more like kind of punchy in the football studio. But again, that reflects that you've got 90 minutes, and that's pretty much it. Downhill, it's like 3 minutes down the hill, and then you've got the peaks are so much more often. So again, it's just about, I've been presenting live TV for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years now. Crikey. And it is about being able to recognize the difference of what you're doing and trying to be yourself, but within the context of what you're doing. And some people, of course, lots of football broadcasters only do football.
Sure.
But I think probably some more of my heroes, like Mark Chapman.
He's very good, isn't he?
He's very good. Claire Baldwin, Gabby Logan, they do a range of things, and I think that's that's like boss level. That's like expertise.
What do you think cricket can learn coverage wise from other sports? Because I think cricket is so insular. I think we just sort of focus on ourselves so much. We don't actually
point
sort
of pride.
of blind.
It's problematic.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we've got our own language,
and we sort of
we have our own things.
We sort of all, and I know they're greats and all that. We mythologize our own.
Yeah.
Sort of cricket broadcasters historically, which is great. Don't get me wrong, because they are great.
They are great.
But
they are great.
I feel like we don't potentially learn from other sports as much as we could.
I mean, that was the other thing. Talk about coming in to do the series. Yeah, I was aware that I was massive outsider. You know who's going to be presenting everything, don't you? And then here's random Mason. But sorry, viewers knew because I'd done the YouTube channel. I've been here. Well, I think probably in terms of TV broadcasting, I think there's a real strength, and this is what TNT is trying to do. We're trying to put the coverage on within the context of a whole load of other sports that we've got, and we are trying to use the expertise that we've got from them. So the Edge, the guy I don't know if you guys have ever seen it or if you do watch any cycling, but around the road, like the Tour de France, there's a show called The Breakaway, hosted by Orla Chenery, and it's something that had lent to what we're trying to do on the Edge. So we sort of looked at that and thought, okay, we want to open it up to other people who might not have watched cricket, or in that case might not have watched cycling. We can give it a bit of a different vibe. Now with the women, again, with women's cricket, it's a bit, even playing it's a bit more of a like open kind of friendly experience probably than some of the more perhaps sometimes po-faced or traditional, let's call it, clubs. But I think honestly, there's so much expertise in sports broadcasting across all of these sports, and yet it's a great point, Yas. You can of course always learn from the way other people are doing things. That's not to say you take their style, but you think, okay, why are they doing that? And how can we use that? And I think pace is one of the things. Just because we have kind of a slow and thoughtful studio around this doesn't mean that's how it always has to be. And some of these other innovations of having, I love the stuff that Sky used to do as well with the masterclasses. So I'm hoping we can join a bit of that in. And cricket's great strength as well is that on coverage, way more than you'd ever see on football, for example. People will say, if you're learning cricket and you're watching at home, take this on board. Now that's wicked for me.
Gary Lineker
never does that.
It never tells us how to kick a ball.
Yeah, I know. And I don't know. I guess it's just a thing that happens more because we've got more time. I'm not sure. But I think, all sports fans have exceptionalism about their sport. That's why people are like, oh, rugby shit, I'm a football fan, or vice versa. It's like,
shit though.
Guys, ha, ha, ha. But fundamentally, we're all sports fans. Yeah. And we know that like getting really deep into a sport is what's fun about it. Following the narrative is what's fun about broadcasting and sport and watching it. If you don't know who the people are, how could you possibly care? So that's what it is. It's about the story.
Do you think you'll ever get to Hazel Irvine levels?
Is that your...
She's the doyen.
Is that your god level?
Oh, God.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Hazel Irvine at the Masters.
Oh, yeah. Well...
There's a lot of snooker chat in this office.
We can but dream. I don't know. I just keep plugging away. I just keep plugging away. I just keep showing up. I just keep, bringing you flowers and to get you to say that I'm good.
Easily done. One last thing on TNT. They're very good on the football. They actually have journalists, not just ex-players, right?
I love that.
Maybe bring that into your...
I think that's your next step. I think that's your next step.
You reckon you could do a better job than Stephen Finn, do you?
I'm not saying that, but I could compliment
the
experts,
Cook.
Right? One could compliment the experts.
The Ebony Rain for Brent.
There's probably room for a third or fourth spot on the sofa.
Fine. We could have a sort of like the little pop-up referee woman.
I'll bring my own chair.
Anyway, no, it's fascinating to hear about it because, as I said, it is becoming like very quietly over the few years a bigger and bigger player in cricket broadcasting.
And is that going to be the case? Do you think down the line? Do you think TNT are properly serious then about cricket and that they're in for the long haul? Do you think?
Clearly and sadly, I'm not doing the rights negotiations.
Right, shocker.
But from what I'm told and what we talk about, they want to bring more and more of the. Like the overseas stuff that they are able to get access to.
They have the India home stuff for the next few years, don't they? And obviously they've had the Australian
There's women's
stuff
Ashes as well coming up. So
that's good.
And it's once you've got the expertise in house, once you know how to do it, you can build. So
interesting. I did warn you, we don't really do short podcasts. Very, very quickly to finish, Phil, where have you been for the last 2 months?
I've been writing a book with Brian Lara. That's the truth of it.
Flex.
And we did it. And it went to print last Friday.
And
I've reread it since we went to print with great trepidation. And it's good. It's good. I read it yesterday and I actually enjoyed it. And so, that's what we've been doing.
You read it yesterday?
Me
all
and
of
BCL.
It?
Yeah.
All of it?
Well, I read a bit of it on Sunday and then read the rest of it yesterday.
How many pages?
And I think it stands up 312. And I think it stands up.
There are a lot of scorecards. A lot of scorecards in
fine.
it.
So you can skim those, or you can really dive.
A lot of scorecards, a lot of pictures, lots of words, lots of insights, lots of revelations.
Do you want to give us one of them?
Oh, it'll all come out next week.
Well. So on next week's podcast, we will be joined by none other than the great man himself, Brian Charles Lara,
and Joe Harmon,
and Joe Harmon,
Hell, guys, great.
So
no one's going to bloody listen to this one, are they? No, they're going to skip straight to next week.
But I think we'll talk about the book in more detail next week, but people can pre-order it now.
Just one good bit. Just give us just one little nugget that you think,
I'll say it. Hang on. So
you read it all?
No, I haven't read it all, but I think me saying bits are good are more powerful than Phil saying bits are good because he has lived it.
You don't trust Phil's judgment. That's what I'm learning.
Well,
from that.
So the bit I'm going to pick out is actually one of the few bits of the book that had nothing to do with Phil. The foreword from Jimmy Adams is fascinating, and I'd even say heartbreaking as well.
Wow.
So he basically talks about, Adams played with Lara for years and years and years through most of Lara's career, knows him really well, and was sort of wondering what Lara finds peace and contentment in, and was hoping that this project would be something that he finds peace and contentment in. Wow. That's just the very, very beginning. So
that is a good plug.
It's a good flavour for, I think, for what follows it.
Phil, you must be very proud.
I'm still in this recovery position. But we did have a party last week, and my wife Emily and her mate Catherine made a cake and printed out the front cover on some kind of sort of, I don't know, icing paper or whatever. So received a cake with the front cover of the book on it. And the big man BCL, he did actually call me the day after and said, "Did you have a nice party?" So he'd actually remembered that we were having a party.
Yas and me must have missed our invite to that.
Yeah, I didn't make that.
There's divisions. Yeah, there's divisions.
The friendship.
But yeah, I mean, I guess the final thing I say about the book is that there are a lot of sports biographies where it's like, this happened in this game, this happened in this game, this is much more, and I think you get a very good sense of what Brian the person is, and for a figure like Lara, how big a figure he is in the game, there's actually very little on what he's like as a person, particularly post-career. So
there's a bit more now.
You can pre-order it now, and you can hear all about it next week, where we've got the great Brian Lara, we've got the great Joe Harmon on next week's show.
I feel like they might talk a little bit more than Phil does though at this point. Can I?
I'm just going to be mute next week.
That's not true.
I'm just going to sit here.
That is so far from what's going to be true.
You asked me about how it felt to get the call up to present the India series. I mean, you must have gone absolutely mad when you realised that Brian Lara and you were going to write a book.
Yeah, the madness embedded itself for 2 months.
In a positive way.
Yeah, well, I didn't really believe it, and it began as a surreal thing.
Do you know how they bonded first?
And then it became
Spurs. So Lara's a Spurs fan.
Yeah, Lara's a Spurs fan.
Stop it.
So his
best club in the world.
So his team that he formed back in Cantaro, the village in Santa Cruz Valley in northern Trinidad, is the Santa Cruz Hotspurs. With an S at the end, by the way. Santa Cruz Hotspurs. And that was a team that he formed because back in the 80s, Glenn Hoddle was his all-time hero.
Come on.
There you go.
I knew you had good judgment.
Cool.
Yeah, no, it began as a surreal thing and then became a very moving and beautiful thing, actually, the truth of it. And whatever happens from here on in the story of Brian Lara and my tiny bit in it, we'll always have that summer together. Amazing, really. Anyway, I hope you all buy it, folks.
Yeah.
You can get it's all, as you say, pre-order.
We'll leave the link in the description.
Yeah, do that. But it's out there. It's really good.
And
I'll get you a signed copy, Mason. How about that?
And signed by you or signed by him?
And people other than Phil think it's really good as well, which is important. Anyway, that is it for today's show. Thank you so much for joining us, Kate. It's been great having you on.
So much fun. Thank you, guys. It is extremely warm in here, isn't it? And I think that's probably just the boiling chat that we've been delivering.
Well, yeah. And Phil, it's been great having you back on.
Yeah, all right.
It's been good. And finally, a reminder that Kia want to help you get closer to the action and create inspiring memories that will last a lifetime. Last year, Kia launched a competition to give young cricket players the opportunity to play at the inspiring Kia Oval. And this year, they want to do it all over again. The Kia Young Cricketer Competition is an amazing experience for 11 to 16-year-olds to live out their cricketing dreams. The day consists of a morning coaching session from Surrey's fantastic coaching team and an afternoon tournament on the iconic outfield.
That's really good.
If you are age 11 to 16 and want to experience this on September the 14th, all you need to do is enter via one of our many links in the description below.